Greetings and welcome to the Hungarian History Podcast, still the only English language podcast dedicated entirely to Hungarian history. I am Szántai Gábor, your host. Since launching this show in April 2025, it has already reached more listeners than the Central European University's Vienna podcast did in its entire first year, at least based on the publicly available information. Thank you for your interest and support. If you enjoy my work, please share it with your friends and consider supporting it. I don't have billionaires backing me, only listeners like you. Today it is our 17th episode, and on our Hungarian History podcast, I'm honored to welcome a distinguished guest of Hungarian Research Institute. Dr. Illik has authored numerous works on early modern Hungarian history with a focus on society, warfare, and diplomacy during the Ottoman and Habsburg conflicts. Dr. Illik Péter has published more than 15 books and over 200 scholarly articles, many of which explore the reinterpretation of the 16th century and the international reception of the Treaty of Trianon. His expertise is widely recognized both in academic circles and public discourse. Dr. Illik's research has contributed greatly to our understanding of Hungary's struggle for autonomy in the early modern period. Beyond academia, he regularly contributes to public debate through lectures, media appearances, and other public engagements, bringing historical perspective to contemporary discussions. It is a privilege to have him with us today as we explore Hungarian history more broadly, with a particular emphasis on why historical narratives can never be fully separated from the political context in which historians operate.
Can I call you Peter?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So, all through history, people have used the past as a tool for political purposes, from medieval chroniclers to modern-day historians. Given this, can we still speak of an objective history, a neutral, detached account that simply presents facts and contexts without interpretation or ideological bias? Or is all history in some sense shaped by the political and cultural framework of those who write it? What do you think?
Okay, actually, I think that no, we cannot speak of an objective history, but it's a very simple answer, and we know that in humanities, the answer itself is not so interesting. The way how we reach the conclusion is more interesting for us. So I want to have a short explanation for this very simple no. The point is that there was a man, an English historian whose name was E.H. Carr, who published a book in 1964. Its title was What is History? Actually, this book was published in Hungary around 30 years later. E.H. Carr is called a kind of a proto-postmodernist historian. And actually, he writes in his book that if we imagine the definitions of history as a scale, then on this scale, we have two extreme poles. Well, I don't want to say on the left and the right, because leftist and rightist have political meanings. In this case, just two poles, one and the other one. So on one pole, we have the explanation presented by, for example, Leopold von Ranke in the middle of the 19th century, and we can find here that the positivists, the neo-positivists, so those who say that there are facts of the past, and these facts of the past are the same as history. So basically, the objective past, obviously the past is objective because it happened as it happened. So according to them, the objective past is the same as the objective history, and basically facts reveal themselves, so they speak for themselves. So they believe in the middle of the 19th century that we have the objective history.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
It makes sense. However, many things happened since then. On the other pole of this scale is the postmodern, or I would say extremist postmodernism, represented by, for example, K. Jenkins, who says that there is the objective past and there is the subjective history, and history is a mental construction of the historian himself. So basically, the historian uses the sources, the written sources, as a kind of apropos to present his or her thoughts. And actually, E.H. Carr wrote in 64 that he believed that the explanation is in the middle. So he says that history is a kind of interaction of the past and the facts of the past, and the present of the author, the historian. So he says that there are two rules of understanding the past. The first one, that we always see the past through the eyes of the present, and the other one, that we always see the past through the personality of the historian. So when we read a book on the past, then we have to understand the author. So I would say that the ideas of E.H. Carr are in the middle on this scale.
So yes, I see, Peter. But let me just interrupt for a moment. So if you are a historian, I have to understand you.
Basically, yes, because actually K. Jenkins says that history is never naive. History is never for history. History is always for something, for somebody. So he thinks that basically history is politics. Historians and those who deal with history have aims, like they want money, they want a good position, a good job in a research team. So in this point of view, this postmodernist point of view, history cannot be separated strictly from politics.
I agree. I agree.
And actually, you said first that Branca sounds good. Actually, he sounds good, but in the 1950s, something happened. Actually, it has been happening even now. This is the postmodern turn. The postmodern turn is often labeled by the objectivist historians as relativism, however it's not. And actually, postmodernism is happening not just in history. It's happening in how we translate, so the science of translations, linguistics, psychology. So in the recent 60, 80 years, many representatives of many different sciences think that there is an objective reality. Of course, they do not deny it, but they claim that different people differently see this reality. So in other words, we have different glasses on our eyes. We have our separate realities.
I see.
And it is, and these realities are defined by our upbringing, studies, and actually there is something which is highly neglected by historians, our emotions. There is a very interesting book. It is published 1 year ago. It's written by a German psychologist, Fritz Reinhold, and the title is The Narrative Brain. So he says that we always create narratives. We always tell stories. Actually, the postmodern says that history is a narrative on the past. So in our normal life, we always create narratives. For example, Gabor, I was in the cinema yesterday. It was fantastic. I watched the film whatsoever. It's a story. So we live in narratives. We think in narratives. And he says that we create narratives because we want emotional rewards.
It's a little bit manipulative, isn't it?
Actually, manipulation is always used as a negative term, but our language is quite manipulative. I mean, nobody says that on my desk there is a glass in which there is 50% of water. We do not say that. We do not speak a neutral language. We say that there is a glass with half full of water or half empty of water. So basically, the two statements, half full or half empty, these are not the same.
Exactly.
And actually, it's not the problem of perspective, because even the traditionalist objectivist historians say that there are different perspectives from which we take a look at something. But what the postmodern says, that even from the same perspective, we can see an event of the past differently based on the same sources. I have to highlight that postmodern historians do not say that you can say anything about the past. I mean, or I would say, I am quite sure that we cannot say anything about the past. Because there are written sources, there are some limitations of interpretations. So if we say that history is a science, then it's possible that based on the same sources, we have different interpretations, but we cannot say anything because there are some limitations. What are these limitations? There are some ethical, moral limitations. There are some legal limitations, and there are some methodological limitations because historians have their methods, how they interpret sources.
Yes.
I don't want to argue for the statement that history is a fiction, which can be anything about some written sources. I just say that maybe it's not as objective as Ranke believed, and we have to accept that there are different interpretations.
Oh, yes, and I remember the novel of George Orwell, where the history has been always written on a daily basis in his great book, 1984, sorry.
Actually, it's a very interesting point because once, a few years ago, I found a book. It was written by a Japanese author. It was a fiction, so he wrote a fiction. And in this fiction, Hitler didn't die, and Hitler became a terrorist.
Oh, I read it. I have read the book.
Who made parodies on Hitler.
Yes.
And the question is that, can we use this book as a source, as a written source about Hitler? No, we cannot, because it's a fiction. But if I have a research, and my question is how Japanese people remember Hitler, the Nazis, and the Second World War, then this book is a source. So I think that every written narrative is a source for something. And actually, if I read a book on the past, so a historical narrative, of course, it's a source about the topic, but as you mentioned, it's also a source about the author as well.
Oh, yes.
Because it mirrors the personality, the interpretation skills of the author. It represents how the author interprets something.
Yes, obviously. Yes, well said. So I think you have just told the point. So it's a very philosophic approach, but we have to be aware of the narratives of several people when it comes to history. So it just makes everything more exciting, isn't it? So my second question. Can we go to the second question?
Of course, but before that, I just have one short remark.
Yes.
That what I told you can be considered as a quite useless theory. But the point is that it has some practical uses, because if you read books, I read once, the title of this book was England, a History.
Mm-hmm.
So if we accept that there are different histories, there are different narratives on the same thing, same events, or the same persons, historically important person, there are different evaluations of the same something, then we can handle what we read, because we cannot get confused. Because for the reader, it can be difficult that he reads a book on the 16th century Hungary, which argues for the fact that for Hungary, Royal Hungary is just fantastic to be part of the Habsburg Empire. Then he reads another book which argues for the opposite. And actually, it's also difficult that historians have very harsh debates, because every historian believes in their narratives, which is natural to a point.
Oh, yeah.
But we have to be open for other solutions as well. So I think that the what is at stake here is to emotionally handle that there are different narratives, and it's not an attack when somebody has a different approach or a different evaluation based on the same sources. So it's not a good reaction to say that, okay, my narrative is completely true and yours is completely not. So in England, debates, the culture of debating is better than in Hungary, I think. Here, there are very harsh debates on different crucial topics. For example, the early history of Hungarians, or the Horthy period, of course, and the third one, which is a very highly debated period, is my research field, the 16th, 17th century.
Oh, this is the most exciting thing for me as well. And I'm very happy that you have just told these things, because these are the only good approaches, in my opinion, as well. So, but in particular, if we turn to Hungarian historiography itself, how have these differing perspectives played out among Hungarian historians across the centuries? For instance, how would you compare the way historical meaning was shaped by your favorite 16th century figures like Szerémi György versus the 20th century historians such as Nemeskürty István or others? What do these differences tell us about how Hungarian history has been interpreted and reinterpreted in different eras?
Actually, hopefully it's visible that you and me have a strategy. We started from the general theory, and then we try to focus on something specific. And this specific is basically my research area is the 16th, 17th century. And you mentioned Szerémi György. Actually, Szerémi György is one of those who created. He's a contemporary, and there are others like István, for example. There are famous Hungarian authors whom we use. And actually, for example, Szerémi was specifically negative on the Hungarian political elite. And it's very interesting that you mentioned Nemeskürty István, because Nemeskürty István, around 400 years later, in 1966, published a book about the battle at Mohács and the consequences. This book was published 2 years later as well, in 1968, and then it was published again. So and actually, it was extremely popular in the 1960s and 70s. And the basic theory of Nemeskürty was first that he wanted to focus on Szerémi and other narrative sources, like chronicles, because he said that historians neglected these sources and they focused rather on charters. So he started to focus on these narratives, like different histories of Hungary written by 16th, 17th century contemporaries. And his other statement was that Hungary, the catastrophe of Hungary was not caused by the battle at Mohács, but those events that happened after that, right after that. Actually, he called it aristocratic banditism. So he said that the high nobles, the aristocrats of Hungary, started to fight against each other, started to rob out the country instead of fighting the Ottomans. In this sense, he basically renewed the theory of Szerémi. Szerémi also wrote quite terrible stories on Hungarian barons. Sometimes I believe that of course, it's a bit extremist opinion, so it's a bit of a joke, but it's like a collection of gossips. So Szerémi wrote quite terrible things, and they focused on interesting things as well. So basically, Nemeskürty renewed the narrative of Szerémi.
Yes, and he has been criticized for it very hard. As I know.
Actually, there were very hard debates. As I mentioned you, that the debates are serious things in Hungary on history. So basically, there were many historians, mostly academic historians, who criticized him. And actually, Nemeskürty tolerated that for almost 10 years. And in 1976, so on an anniversary of the battle at Mohács, he answered to the critics. And he said, and it's extremely important, I think, he said that he thought that the major problem was with his book, that he was not determinist. So, to translate it to practical language, the theory of Nemeskürty is that, okay, the battle at Mohács happened, but the Hungarian social political elite had the power to change, so it was not determined, it was not necessary to walk on a way which led to 1541, when the Ottomans captured Duda, and it was not necessary that by 1568, the second Treaty of Trianon, Hungary was completely divided into three parts. Because I have to say, it's a very common idea that Hungary was divided into three parts in 1541. No, that's the beginning. So that's the symbolic beginning. But the Ottomans needed around 25, 30 years to pacify those regions which they acquired. So basically, Nemeskürty is an anti-determinist historian, and this is the theoretical background of Nemeskürty. And those who criticized him, they were mostly determinists. So they claimed, and actually even now they claim, that the battle at Mohács happened because the Ottoman Empire's territories are a few times bigger than the Hungarian kingdom. The army of the Ottoman Empire was also several times bigger than the Hungarian army, and the revenues of the Sultan were also bigger than the royal revenues in Hungary. So they say that actually the outcome was determined. Therefore, it's not the mistake of the Hungarian social-political elite what happened. If we take a look at the anti-determinist and determinist theories, then they lead to an ultimate problem. And this ultimate problem is that is it a legitimate question to ask what if, what would have happened, or it's not a legitimate question?
Exactly, and here I would like to put in that I have always said that the what if question is necessary because everything is about it. It is my personal opinion, Peter. Maybe I am wrong.
Actually, I think the same. I am fascinated by this question because, and here it's a bit of a linguistic explanation, but I think it's okay. If right now, I'm asking, okay, what if I do this or that? It's a legitimate question. Let's suppose that 500 years earlier, those decision makers who led the country also asked, what if? So they had to consider the different possible actions and their consequences. So then we ask right now, what would have happened 500 years before? Then basically we try to create a model on the alternative actions of the past. Yes. And I think it's a completely legitimate way of thinking. So I highly agree with you.
I mean, yes, and the whole thing comes down to the Habsburg people. I mean, those Hungarians who adore and enjoy the Habsburg narrative, and those who hate it. So in this historical discourse here in Hungary, not only among professional historians, but also in the general public, like I'm not a historian, we have these two opposing narratives. The more Habsburg-friendly and another that is explicitly Habsburg-critical, like me. How would you describe the key differences between these two approaches?
Actually, as I told you, sometimes there is no strict border between politics and history. So if we accept E.H. Carr's basic statement that we look at the past through the eyes of the present, then it's important to understand that this narrative that is it good for Hungary to be in an empire or not is a constant dilemma. Why? Because Hungary is part of the Habsburg Empire between 1526 and actually 1918. After that, Hungary is part of an empire, the Soviet Empire, let's say from 1945, but we can say 1949. Actually, at this point of my argumentation, it doesn't really matter. Until 1989. And actually, the recent 30 years, Hungary is part of the European Union. So it's a constant dilemma for this country how to be in an empire and to be autonomous.
Oh, Peter, yes, I just can't resist and tell you the joke. Do you know that we were once part of the Habsburg Empire and it fell apart? Then we were part of the Soviet Empire and it fell apart, and now we are part of the European Union, and they had to be careful.
Actually, it refers to a serious model. There's the Hungarian author István Örkény, who had the theory on Mohács that Hungary always survived, and those empires which conquered Hungary, they fell apart. This is the theory of being a winner as a loser.
Yes.
So sometimes losing is a winning situation.
Let's see the sunny side.
Well, actually, I have another joke on this, that marriage is like a castle under siege, because those who are in the inside want to go outside, and those who are outside, they want to go inside. So situations have different perspectives, actually. But going back to the original question, the pro-Habsburgian and anti-Habsburgian narratives. Actually, this narrative, let's call it disruption or division, was born right then in the 16th century. So even among the contemporaries, there were those who supported János Szapolyai from 1526 and those who supported Ferdinand I. So this narrative division has a very long reception history, actually 500 years. And the narrative is not so simple because it was connected to another narrative, which is the anti-Ottoman, Turkish and pro-Turkish, pro-Ottoman narrative. For example, in the 19th century, there was a Hungarian historian, Sándor Takács, who was actually Catholic, which is interesting for us because in the 16th, 17th century, the majority of the Catholic narrators were pro-Habsburgians because the Habsburg court was Catholic. Sándor Takács is a historian. He was Catholic, but he was anti-Habsburgian, and he had a very romantic, positive image on the Ottomans because his explanations, his narrative included that even the Ottomans were better than the Habsburgs.
Yes.
So the point is that in the 19th century, in the Hungarian history or historiography, the anti-Habsburgian narratives were dominant.
It's obvious why.
This dominance remained during the Horthy period. However, there was a historian, a very creative but ambivalent historian, Gyula Szegfű, whose books, let's say, started to challenge this dominant 19th century anti-Habsburgian narrative. And then came the socialism. And as far as I can see, I mostly took a look at the history course books, textbooks of the socialism. So that's my other field of, let's say, expertise. The socialism in Hungary had a dilemma because they didn't want to support nationalism, so nationalist ideas, but they also opposed the Habsburg so-called imperialism. So they had to make a decision, and their decision was that in, for example, the history textbooks, the narratives in the 16th, 17th centuries were mostly nationalistic, which means that rather anti-Habsburgians. So it's a bit surprising, but the 19th century nationalist anti-Habsburgian, let's say, patriotistic narrative survived during the socialism.
I remember.
And actually, the point is that after 1989, many Hungarian very talented historians started to go to the archives of Vienna, for example, started to use Habsburg imperial resources, and they started to challenge this anti-Habsburgian narrative, and they started to represent a pro-Habsburgian narrative.
Yes, and they seem to have become the mainstream nowadays.
Yes, you are right. But actually, if we take a look at this in a postmodern point of view, which says that there is a narrative pluralism. So if there are different narratives which are methodologically correct, so these narratives are based on sources, they are legal and legitimate narratives, then actually it's not a problem that there is a kind of challenge. So narratives always challenge themselves. There is a kind of competition. The problem is, I think, that nowadays the mainstream historians tend to forget that the other narrative exists.
Yeah. Yes.
And the problem with this one, so maybe the complete dominance of one narrative is not the most productive idea. So you are right. Nowadays there are many representatives of the Habsburgian narratives, and there are just a few representatives of the older traditional anti-Habsburgian narratives. So basically, historiographically, this is the situation. But if you take a look at the last 500 years, then basically there are different periods in which there are different dominant narratives. In this sense, I mean, considering the pro and the anti-Habsburgian narratives. Actually, nowadays the government itself represents the anti-Habsburgian narrative, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take a look at different fields of the common opinion or the public opinion or public reception, then we can see that, for example, if you take a look at historical films like Adik or Punyadi, then actually the film industry represents rather the anti-globalist, nationalist, autonomist ideas. But the professional historians, the professional mainstream of historians, as you said, rather represent the pro-Habsburgian narratives.
It is all the more interesting what you say, Peter, because I am running Facebook groups about history and these topics, and have a page reaching over 1 million people a month. And I meet bloody debates and debates of general people, common people, and there are emotions, and I can sense it what you say, and they are not as nice as historians. So there are very bad fights going on. So this what you are telling me is very interesting and important. And I guess we must talk more about this. It was utterly interesting for me, and I hope to our listeners as well. So can I have the pleasure to continue with you this conversation later?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the invitation.
I thank you, Peter. So it was Dr. Illik Péter in the Hungarian History Podcast, and I was Szántai Gábor. So goodbye, sziasztok, viszont hallásra!